About 80% of people say that they have worked for a micromanager before, and 1/3 of them have said that they've changed jobs because of the micromanager that they worked for. Now, it's really fun to talk about other people being micromanagers, but today I'm going to talk about your inner micromanager. So, this is my son. I have some friends that are behavioral scientists who had kids before me, and they told me that one of the most humbling things that you can do as someone that's an expert in behavior is have a kid. And I'm only 5 months in, and I unequivocally agree. And I know I haven't seen anything yet. My micromanager has never reared its ugly head as much as it has since I've been a parent. Now, obviously, my son is too young for my bullying, but I want to micromanage everyone who comes into contact with him, including my husband. Now, of course, this is because it's something that's very important to me, or at least that's what I tell myself, and that's probably what most micromanagers tell themselves when they're micromanaging. So what is micromanagement? It's really providing more management than what is necessary. Micromanagement is really different from person to person. It's hard to pinpoint it. What feels like micromanagement to one person probably doesn't feel like that to another. So if you're managing all of your people in the same way, probably chances are good that some of them are feeling micromanaged. So I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of micromanagement, and the first one is a personal one. When I first moved in with my husband, I would go and get the groceries, and I'd come home and I'd put the groceries away, and then he would re-put the groceries away. He's very particular about which way the label should face and which cans should be next to each other, and after a while of trying to learn his system of putting groceries away, I finally got to a point where I just put the groceries on the counter and said, "Honey, the groceries are here," and then walked away. I reached out to some colleagues for some other examples of micromanagement, and one colleague gave me an example of a call center that she worked in college. And so in this call center, when you would arrive at the day, in the start of the day, you would punch in a number to kind of punch in, and at the end of the day, you'd punch in a number. But you also had to punch in a number each time you went for a bathroom break and when you returned from the bathroom break. And they would publicly post how many bathroom breaks you took per day and how long they were. So this was good motivation to eat your fiber each day. Another colleague gave me an example of a CEO who was looking through emails, everyone's email before they were sent, and she was spending 5 or 6 hours a day checking everyone's emails before they were sent. So you can imagine how little work got done because of this behavior. So she's probably checking these emails thinking she wants to make sure things are going well, but actually she's making things worse in her organization by doing this. She really created a bottleneck through this. So as much as we'd like to deny it, we're all micromanagers sometimes. When we micromanage, it communicates that we don't trust people, that we think that the task isn't getting done well, but more importantly, it communicates that we care more about those details or the task than we do about the relationship. So why do we micromanage? We might micromanage if we haven't figured out how to know what's going on without directly observing. We might also micromanage if we are also being micromanaged. So we're just passing down the abuse, as Howard would say. We might also micromanage if we haven't created the conditions for our employees to tell us when things are going wrong. So we need to go and find out all the details so we can tell personally when things are going wrong. And we might also micromanage if we've been promoted to a more strategic position and the previous position of being more task-oriented was more reinforcing. And lastly, if we're too busy, then we're probably not spending time being strategic, and instead we're getting ourselves into the weeds. So micromanaging can also be really reinforcing. There's immediate reinforcement in micromanagement because as soon as we tell someone to do something, they probably do it and it gets done, right? So we're getting this immediate reinforcement similar to something like smoking or drinking too much or eating unhealthy food, but it creates this long-term damage for us. On the other hand, thoughtful, strategic leadership probably isn't very reinforcing on the short term. you have to start to learn to derive reinforcement from seeing other people be successful. And that can be really difficult to do if you work in an environment that's mostly run on negative reinforcement and punishment. So you kind of have to put that umbrella up and block all that other stuff that's coming down and focus on the long term and put some little reinforcers in the way for you along the way. So how do you know if you're micromanaging? If you feel like you're doing more work than anybody else around you, you're probably micromanaging. If you feel annoyed if people don't run decisions by you all the time, you're probably micromanaging. If you are spending a lot of time looking at other people's tasks and you know all the details of your people's tasks, then you're probably micromanaging. And there's a really great quote from this guy who's a managing director at Volvo, Martin Merrick, who was at the BMT conference this past May, and he was on the panel, and he said, if you are getting hundreds of emails every single day, you're probably micromanaging. So what's the result? When we micromanage, it's more difficult to learn, it's more likely that people will be unengaged, and they might even think that you're a jerk. It's very rare that you hear people say, I work for a micromanaging lunatic and I love him, right? You're probably not going to say that. So, you know, there's a lot of bad downstream impact from this kind of micromanaging behavior. But you have choices. So a friend of mine shared a story about micromanaging his son when he was teaching him to ride a bike. So he felt like he was really overcoaching his son, kind of running behind him, holding the bike. He didn't want to take off the training wheels, was trying to wait as long as possible to take off the training wheels. And of course, any parent wouldn't want their kid to fall and scrape their knee when they're teaching them to ride a bike, right? But this kind of stuff creates more stress, both for the parent and probably even more so for the child. Right? And at the end of the day, your kid is probably riding a bike, but it's really up to the choices that you make, whether or not it was a fun experience for them or whether or not it was a stressful experience for them and they never want to learn something from you again. And so when you have, there really are a lot of choices that we have instead of micromanaging. So our choices are to let the person experience those natural consequences, to wait, and maybe we can micromanage again later. If it's something that comes up a lot, there'll be another opportunity down the road. We can also try to think about some other strategies to kind of shape this behavior that are more kind of strategic and thoughtful coaching strategies. So we don't have to micromanage in each situation. And we need to ask ourselves each time we're tempted to micromanage if it's truly worth it. If fixing this one small detail now is worth that long-term damage later. So how do we lead without micromanaging? One of the things we need to do is start figuring out, okay, so can we delegate some of the tasks that we have more? Maybe we need to start asking for more feedback as well. Although I would suggest that people who micromanage a lot probably don't ask for very much feedback, right? If you were getting a lot of feedback from your people, you probably aren't micromanaging. So I guess, you know, that's a place to start if you're afraid that you are micromanaging. Another thing that would be a great idea if you're a micromanager is to list all the things that you've been doing that are micromanaging. Send it out to your people and say, I will no longer be doing these things. And if I do, I want you to tell me and stop me. Because this gives your people permission to say, stop micromanaging, right? And if you can open up that dialogue, it's going to be able to shift your behavior. So if you are the one being micromanaged, how can you avoid this? There's a really great example of a woman who was recently promoted, and her boss was her new boss was a notorious micromanager. And she knew him pretty well, so right in the first week she said, I want you to tell me all the information that you need me to share with you. And so he gave her a list of information, and then after that point, every time he asked her for additional information, she would say, that's not on the list of things that we agreed to that I should share with you. And if anything comes up that's concerning, I'll let you know. So she kind of managed his behavior along the way. Now that you have to be pretty brave to do something like that, I think. Another person that I coached that was being micromanaged, after some attempts to talk to his boss and it wasn't working, he decided he would try another strategy, which was to flood his boss with information. So give him way more information than he was even asking for. And so then at that point, the boss said, whoa, 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 that was too much information. Let's talk about how much you should be sharing. And then they had a good discussion about it. If you feel like you couldn't do either of those two strategies, then something that's pretty simple that you could probably do is start labeling how the micromanaging is making you feel. So you could say something like, every time you ask me for these details, it makes me wonder if you think that I'm not performing as well as I should be. So a statement like that could then start to communicate to your boss that you feel like they're asking for a little too much information. I just had to put that picture in there. It doesn't really relate to what I'm going to talk about here. But so how do you create the conditions for success? In order to be a great leader or a great parent or a great spouse, we have to get rid of some of our bad behaviors. And in order to do that, we need to start thinking about what's that long-term thing that we want to happen and get our behavior to move in that direction, which can be pretty difficult. But really, you personally gain a massive amount of benefit by not micromanaging other people, because long-term you've helped them learn, you've helped them grow, you've given them an opportunity to be creative, and you've built a strong relationship with those people. So it benefits not only you, but it benefits the people that you're working with. And so I would argue that one of the ways to create the conditions for success is to let people do their job and give them the opportunity to experience success and give them the space to experience success rather than worrying about all of those little details. So, thank you.